All right. Yeah, 72 should work. Okay. So this review, I meant, as I said on my Twitter, I meant to record and post last night. Unfortunately, I simply did not have time to do so because I was running around trying to get the story for my newspaper job at the Fairfax County Times finished up, and I finally got it done today completely. And I also had a bunch of other stuff going on, so I wasn't able to squeeze this in anywhere. Um, so I'm gonna review a movie that recently hit its 20th anniversary, and Remember the Titans, which is probably one of the more popular football movies I could think of, not only in recent memory, but also in just cinematic history of football films. And the story, for those of you who are unaware, is about the 1971 season where the T.C. Williams Titans went undefeated and won the state championship. But the main, the reason why there's more to it than that. This was when the school of T.C. Williams was recently integrated. So the focus is more about the team bringing the community together. That's where the true underdog story lies, that the school is being blended with black and white football players. They have a black head coach, and the white head coach that was there before has been demoted. And the main crux of the story is the players and the coaches learning to band together to create a cohesive football team, which would go on to be one of the more impressive runs in high school football history, especially around here in Virginia. I mean, T.C. Williams is actually in Alexandria, so that's not really far from where I live here in Burke. And a little fun fact is that T.C. Williams was named after a man named Thomas. I believe his middle name was Church, so Thomas Church Williams. And the school TC was founded in 1965. Unfortunately, Mr. Williams was a very, very strong supporter of keeping schools segregated. So the fact that 6 years later he had to integrate the school, I'm sure he wrote a few vile letters about how he was against this. So the school was named after a racist asshole, and it ended up integrating 6 years later, which I just think is brilliant. I just love that, you know. So the story, okay, obviously, much like films like 42, the movie does deal with racism, and from the beginning of the story, you do see the tension in the town. You do see how restless everyone is getting. It seeps into the football team, and when the football team does ultimately go to do training camp, which apparently they had been practicing earlier in the summer, but the training camp they went to was 6 days later than the date that they had started. So honestly, the main issue about the team overcoming racism is taken care of in the majority of the first act, and it it's it's very believable because at first, even though the 2 to 3 practices a day was already commonplace at that point, and even though it was seen as more of a threat to force team unity, the movie does kind of build it up slowly. At first, everyone's at each other's throats. They really don't want to be next to each other, but over the course of the camp, they do end up bonding, and it's done in a way where it's not only believable, but it's really sweet and very charming to see these men come together and become brothers. And I think the scene that really signifies the team unity is one scene where team captain Gary Bertier calls out one of the linemen for doing a crappy job of blocking. And then he and defensive end Julius Campbell make a great tackle. and they start screaming, "Strong side, left side, strong side, ah!" That was the moment, and the music swells. So even if the musical cue didn't come in, I think that it would have been obvious that these men have gone from animosity to a brotherly bond. So that was very beautifully done. And as far as the football scenes go in the movie, they're really well executed. As someone who's watched football, I do think they got the sport down well. They show the sport in a way that doesn't make it hard for non-football fans to follow, because again, the story is much bigger than football, but they do have a lot of terminology in there. The one thing I thought was weird about some of the football scenes is that I feel like some of the shots that you see of the characters on the field, it feels like I'm not sure how to explain it, but I don't know, something about the way they angle it, something about the way they shoot it, where it's almost like, okay, you know how in Madden you can focus on one player and then go completely on that. I don't know. It's just I'm not sure what it is, but something about the camera angles throughout the majority of the game scenes seems a little weird, you know. But for the most part, I do like it. I do love the drama on the sidelines because there's always a lot of drama on the sidelines. Anyone who's played sports of any sort can tell you that it gets a little tense when you're on the bench because you're pulling for your team to win. The coaches are getting steamed up. The refs are calling stupid penalties and all that stuff. It just kind of builds up to that, you know. And the scene where the officials are rigging the game in terms of penalties, I believe from what I remember reading, that did occur, but that game was not going to determine whether Coach Yost went into the High School Football Hall of Fame because that didn't exist. There is no High School Football Hall of Fame. There's a Pro Football Hall of Fame. I believe there's a College Football Hall of Fame, but there was none for the high school. That was just added in for more drama, and there are a few liberties that this movie does take with reality. For example, Yost only having one daughter that's football obsessed when he really had three or four. The other daughters were okay with it. Yost didn't like it. Unfortunately, Cheryl wasn't able to say anything because by the time the movie was in production, Cheryl Yost had been dead for 4 years. By the time the movie came out. So there was that. Another scene that I do feel like was a good change to the movie because this change seemed understandable. A good change was the scene where Cheryl Yost is at the Boone's house and someone throws a brick through the window and does a drive-by shooting. Um, that did happen, only Cheryl wasn't there in the house, and it was a part of a broken toilet fixture that got thrown through the window. Now, the reason why they changed it to a brick in the movie is that they felt like if someone threw a toilet through a window, then people would find that to be more humorous than horrifying. My only problem with that logic is that I think the tone of the scene would be horrifying enough for us to take that seriously. I think regardless of what they threw through the window, if it was able to yeah, they were shooting at the house, so I'm sure that we would have taken any object seriously. And I mean, look, I mean, the or Boone's wife takes the kids out of the place, and Herman goes running out of the house with a rifle in hand to defend his house. So yeah, as far as the performances go, I really do like Denzel Washington as Boone because he does walk that fine line of being tough and being sympathetic. You know, I mean, he is literally every great football coach that has ever been in the position. You know, you're not going to take anyone's bullshit. You're going to be tough. You're going to demand excellence, and ultimately, the team will respond to that if you do it the way he does it, where he's tough but fair. You know, those are a lot of football coaches. In fact, the tough but fair coaches I've had when I played football, those teams tended to be much better than the coaches that were more fast and or loosey goosey. Anyway, so another thing I would like to bring up is that the ending, while it is a little melodramatic, it's very well done. Because for one thing, the real Titans team, they were undefeated, but the championship game they won by like three touchdowns. I No, they won 27-0, so that's four touchdowns. I understand why they changed it to be a more low scoring tight game in the film, because blowouts are not fun to watch for a film that's meant to be dramatic and leave you cheering on your feet. So I understand why they made it more dramatic. Um, Now, as far as Bertier not being able to play the game because he got into a paralyzing car accident, the paralyzing car accident did happen, but it was after the state championship game. And again, I understand why. They wanted to create drama and create some tension for the following scenes. And it was also meant to show in the movie how far Julius and Gary have come in terms of friends. From being combative and fighting with each other at first to being very closely related, because they're the key relationship in this film in terms of brotherhood. Aside from Yost and Boone, those two guys are the heart of the movie as well. And like any movie that has a huge ensemble piece, there's only a few players they can really focus on to help move along the story without being too convoluted and needlessly complicated. So, my one criticism about the final game is that I feel like the final play is a little unrealistic. I get the idea that Boone wants to call, without giving away the ending. Well, I mean, I already said they won the state championship, but without giving away how they win the game, they call a play that no coach would call in that situation. They call a running play. Fuck it, I'll just spoil it. They call a running play that's basically a halfback sweep where the quarterback takes the ball, tosses it to the running back who runs in a semicircle down the field and has a convoy of blockers to plow the road. You're 60 to 70 yards away from the end zone, and you have just 7 seconds left, and you're down by 3. No, you're down by 4. Most coaches would try to get a quick chunk play to get into easier Hail Mary range and then throw a Hail Mary. I get that Boone is like, we want to throw something that this team isn't ready for, but I don't think any coach would have done that. You know, I'm not even sure if the real Boone would have done that. But I mean, aside from that, I really do think the movie has a lot of positive messages. I think it's actually kind of important to watch this movie now because of the anthem protests and the Black Lives Matter. This film is definitely very relevant now. It always has been, but it's even more relevant considering the current state of things in America. And I also think I do love the message of how sports brings people together, because the more successful the team becomes, the more united the community becomes as a whole. So it's a very beautiful analogy that they try to put together, and there's a lot of great performances in here. The film does have a lot of heart. The soundtrack is really playful and has a nice beat to it because it's mainly rock songs from that era. So I think it's a very relevant and a very charming film about young men coming together and standing up to do the right thing and ultimately playing a sport we all love. So that's all I gotta say. On Friday, I'm going to post my next Bruce Springsteen cover, and I'll see you guys then. Take care.